Vasudevendra Yogendram Natva Jnana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattva Bodho Bhidiyate. 3 sets we are conducting the inquiry of. The purpose being of each is to get to know who we are not, whereby our identity is being placed into one of these sets. Thereby existential questions come in, and they start to pursue the nature of I. Who is the subject behind all of the experiences? What's the nature of the subject? What's the connection of the subject to the world, to God? And what is the final liberation of this subject? To come to that answer, the 3 sets are employed, and they're all for purposes of for different personalities. For some of us, when we hear the waking, the dream, and the deep sleep, this may not speak to you so much as it speaks, such as the 3 bodies. The reason being is, and there is a strong identity with the waking state, that when you start to analyze the waking state, being identified with them so much, we don't quite connect with this. In fact, it is said that the 3-state teaching from Mandukya Upanishad, if you understand the 3 states and you're able to digest that and relate with that and connect with the 3 states, because they're so all-encompassing, the waking state need not to analyze the 3 bodies, because the 3 bodies are in the waking state. You need not analyze your life even though it can help, and it is certainly a prerequisite to Vedanta, because life is taking place in the waking state. So if you're able to connect with the 3 states based on inquiry and analysis, then all of the other Upanishads become like magazines. You can just read them for fun. They don't have that power to do anything more for you than what Mandukya Upanishad has already done. And it's said that if you don't get the 3 states and it doesn't have an impact on you, then all of the other Upanishads now have to come. They have to make up for what Mandukya Upanishad not having that impact on you. Therefore, the other Upanishads like Katha Upanishad, right, Chandogya Upanishad, all of them now have to make up for that. And the 3 bodies also is something that some of us relate with. So this means there is an option for different personalities. That's why we have these 3 prakriyas. We've got the prakriya. Prakriya means method. There's a prakriya of the 3 bodies. There's a prakriya of negating the 3 states. And there's a prakriya of negating the 5 koshas. And therefore, they are there for you to use for your inquiry. So again, I want us to take this as something that you can relate with, something that you kind of connect with. So it's not about hearing one thing and saying this doesn't work, this doesn't vibe with me, this doesn't speak my language, and then we kind of dismiss everything else. It's just there to adapt to a certain personality. So the 3rd prakriya, which is the 5 sheaths, and that is what we will discuss today. What we need to understand about the 5 koshas is that, first of all, what does kosha mean? Because it's called a 5 kosha prakriya. Kosha means as though a cover. The reason I say it is as though a cover is because it is not actually a cover. Cover what? Cover you, cover Atma, cover awareness. The reason why it cannot cover awareness, you, is because Atma is in a different order of reality than anything else. You cannot cover awareness because nothing in existence enjoys the same order of reality as awareness. Were it to do so, then Atma would become another object. It would be something that you can cover, but if you can cover it, it means it is an object. It means it's mithya. However, Atma is Satyam. No Mithya can ever cover Satyam. However, owing to the confusion, being Atma, your nature, being Atma, owing to the confusion, we experience as though we are covered, even though you're never actually covered. If you were to be covered, that would be a contradiction, because then you would say, I am covered. But this I am that is covered, being the nature of awareness, it cannot be so, because just to recognize that there is a cover implies that there is an awareness, something has not been covered. So even if you say, I am covered, then it's obvious that you're not covered because you just know that you're covered. You understand this point? Okay. So nothing can cover you. If you were to be covered, then you would never pursue the search. You would never pursue growth, because it would be all there is to world, this matter, this body, these thoughts. You would be completely happy with your life. However, that is not the case with anyone's experience. No matter how much one progresses or evolves, there is always room for improvement. There is a voice, an insistent voice that says, yeah, but there is more. I want more. I want more. And then getting more, then that voice simply never leaves. And therefore that search continues. So this means no matter what I've gotten or how much have I learned, it is still not enough to solve the problem of this insistent voice that there is something more. In chapter 7, Chandogya Upanishad, Narada approaches Sanat Kumara. Narada is a fella who studied 80 plus subjects of the world: geography, history, biology, chemistry, mathematics, astrology, you name it. He has studied this for 4 billion years. Every day. Imagine that, studying every day for 4 billion years. This is just a story. Don't ask me how is this possible. Studied all of the topics in existence for 4 billion years. Get this. This guy is better than a computer. He can recall, he can calculate, he can analyze, he can impress you like there's no tomorrow. He goes up to his teacher, Sanat Kumara, and says, I have done all of this for a long time. I know all of the topics in the world, in existence. I'm still not happy. Give me that knowledge, knowing which I will feel fulfilled once and for all. Sanat Kumara thereby gives himself knowledge, the same knowledge that the Tattvabodha is expounding. And finally, Narada says, for the first time, I have resoluted my peace. I have found my peace. I have found what I was looking for. All of those topics, all of that knowledge simply could not fulfill me. There was always something more. So if you think that you can capture some topic and master it in this lifetime of 100 years, think of Narada, 4 billion years, every topic in the world, and still pursues the same knowledge, end of the day, that we are all ultimately seeking for yourself, the fullness that you are. So this gives us some reassurance that end of the day, when all is said and done, the only thing that really matters, not that other things don't matter, they have their relative transactional use, is knowing thyself. Who and what am I? What is my truth? What is my connection to myself, to others, to the world? What is the truth in all of this? And what is this truth abide? It abides in me, but what is this me in which the truth, that is the truth itself? And thereby, this is what we are investigating. First step is to recognize this. Nothing can cover you because you are Satyam. You are not in the same order of reality as this world. Was it Jesus who wonderfully said, I am in this world, but not of this world? This was a wonderful statement that says the same teaching in a different way. So we have prophets like this who spoke throughout history these wise statements, which take some discernment, that take some deciphering, but Vedanta makes it very clear what Jesus actually meant, because there's no way to know. What does he mean when he says, I am in this world, but not of this world? There's no way you can know that unless you employ logic after logic, but we don't have long enough to live. So we need something that is systematic and methodological. There's a nice methodology there. Okay. So So again, you being a different order of reality, nothing can cover you. Just like a scar, you can cover your scar and put a makeup on there, but can you cover your knowledge of the scar? Can't do that. Okay, so your knowledge is going to be there, and no matter how hard you try, it just cannot be covered. So it is like that. You can cover one, but you cannot cover the other. Okay, so let's go into the first Maya. Now we have Anamaya, Pranamaya, this Maya, 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 all throughout. So Maya has two words. This is not Maya, the macrocosmic all knowledge, all power. We are talking about a different word, Maya, M-A-Y-A, which has two definitions, and these are important. Otherwise, the whole teaching is going to have a different understanding. The first definition of Maya is saturation or fullness. Saturation or fullness. So if you say, for example, Ana means food. So Ana Maya. So food, fullness. So by definition, then it's saying that your body is full of food. But is it really full of food? Do you see food in your body? Right? You don't see food in your body. You see there's a conversion of food. And therefore, the second definition of Maya is modification or conversion. So when we say Maya, we're not referring to definition 1, we're referring to definition 2, modification or conversion. So let's start with Ana Maya. Ana is food and Maya is modification. So what it's saying is your body, because Ana Maya is just your body, it means your body is a Maya of Ana, modification of food. So what is food, right? And food is 5 elements. 5 elements is the constituents that make up this universe. It's just a Vedic model, right? We have the periodic table of elements model. We have the 5 elements model. So the 5 elements make up your body, but they also made up your parents' body. And that 5 elements that made up your parents' body, how did it make up your parents' body? Because the 5 elements make up food. They make up the soil, they make up the fruits, they make up the vegetables, they make up the meat. And so this meat was then eaten by your parents, and this meat, through a process of digestion, was converted into nutrients for the body to grow and develop. So this extra bulk, this extra meat of your parents that was there, that was a product of conversion from food into this meat, into this bone marrow, into the nutrients, into vitamin B complex, and all of these proteins that are necessary for growth. There was a conversion process. While this process of copulation was there, what happened? The sperm was also made out of food, but just converted differently in the form of sperm, right? We have heart is also food, but it's heart muscle. Lung is also food, but it's muscle fascia of the lungs, of the spleen, of the stomach, of the enzymes of the stomach, and so on. So it's all food. And then we have the egg of the woman, of the female. So this combined together, both being a product of 5 elements, which got converted into food, which got converted in a form of a sperm and an egg, and they joined together and they created a zygote. As Lorena said some sessions ago, she was correct, I remember. Yes. And zygote is the first process when there is a combination of sperm and egg. And so this slowly, couple of weeks, to turn into a embryo. The embryo means basically the division of cells. Now, how is the division of cells possible? By the sustenance of your mother's body through food. So whatever was inside those cells, it was nothing but food that your mom was eating and the water that she was drinking, which was being converted into that energy capable of splitting that cell into powers of 2, 2, 4, 8, whatever this division is. Thereby, by the 9th week, what happened? That cell structure formed uniformly in a certain fashion as to create a template of a body. We'd call that the fetus. From 9 weeks onwards, that fetus started to continue evolving by the help of the food that your mom was eating. And then eventually, when that final moment came, which we say happy birthday to every single year, I don't understand why do we say happy birthday? It's more like, okay, you're born now, get on with it, right? But anyway, so then we were born on the 9th month, and it's 9 months, right? I want to make sure I got that right. Okay, cool. Can it be longer? 10 or 9 or 8? I wonder. 10 months? Okay. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Why is it 10 months and not 9 months, right? So this is another question that we will pose later when we come to the order and the laws that govern various facets of this reality. But anyway, so 9th or 10th month, we got born and we continued drinking milk, which was conversion from food into the breasts of the mom. And that too started to sustain your body and create and continue that cell division of your own little body. Eventually, when you were able to eat on your own, with that whole, messy mouth and all of that silly stuff, and you were able to chew, right? Now, though that chewing was possible by the strengthening of the muscles of the jaw, that strengthening was proteins developed through the food that you ate prior to that. So like this, right? Process of development, of cell division, of strengthening of the muscles starts to develop, and it builds a body in a fashion according to, as we spoke last sessions, your karma. So therefore, you end up having a certain look, a certain conduct, a certain kind of, bulky body, thin body, and it kind of carries on. This template carries on throughout life. And why is this so? This is because of this karma, more or less. Of course, you can add onto it or you can subtract onto it depending on the food. However, there is a baseline because some of us, we just have a certain body, and no matter what you eat, or you can eat more or less normal, your body remains at a baseline, right? So that baseline is the body that you were given. Of course, this can be edited or manipulated through eating extra fats and carbohydrates and whatever, right? But just there's a baseline there. So the point is, throughout the entire process, all of this are modifications of food that came from the soil, and then eventually your body gets old and it goes back into the very soil from which it was made possible in the first place. Because all of the food you ever ate came from the soil. The soil got nutrients converted and helped and aided those plants. And therefore, there's a nice little cycle of life like this. Your body becomes food for other bodies. That's how it is. In that same manner, your body here is because you use the food of other bodies, believe it or not, of worms and, creepy crawlies and dinosaurs. And, I don't know how long the history goes, but the point is we don't see this in the soil. We just see soil, but inside the soil, it carries history of bodies which decomposed and converted into the soil. And your body, like any other, becomes the same addition to this ecosystem to support other plants and so on. So now, therefore, your body is born of food. It is sustained by food, and it becomes food for others. So we can see that there is a satya-mithya relationship even in reference to your body. Your body is made up of food. Food is made up of herbs. Herbs as a result of soil made up of molecules made up of other bodies, and so on. So there is a satya-mithya relationship. But even if you look at your body, where is body? Show me a body, please. You're going to say this, oh, here's a body. But yeah, exactly, David, right? But what do you mean when you point? Because where are you pointing? Suppose you point to your neck. That's the point. A neck plus 2 arms plus 2 legs. And if you take just the leg, Show me a leg, please. Where's your leg? Oh, okay, I'll show you a leg right there. Well, a leg is made up of toes, it's made up of skin, it's made up of muscle, it's made up of bone, right? So now where exactly, are you pointing to when you say body? What do you refer to? The answer is we are referring to this Satya Mithya relationship. Every limb is made up of further constituents that make up that limb, which then conglomerate into one homogeneous system, which we call human body. Heart, lungs, kidneys, spleen, brain, neck, hands, fingers, hand, right? Skin. And that skin and that hand and so on is further driven by various laws, such as the physiological order that governs how that system will work in response to the data being received from the world. So you have to have a way to now work, to use this conglomeration of limbs and heart and spleen and brain and food, and that system that converts food into and sustains this body. This body now has to have a mechanism to interact with the world so that this indweller, the jiva, can gain what they want in this world. Now, all of this is provided for us. And therefore, what the Prakriya is saying here is, it's wonderful to appreciate the body. However, the teaching is, despite this wonder and this amazement of how the human body is composed of many parts, the teaching is it is just made up of forms within forms, within forms, within forms, within forms, within forms. And this we get attached to. What are you really getting attached to? You're getting attached to name, just a name, body. Name for what? Name for many limbs, right? Name for many limbs put together. Heart. What is a heart? Made up of many muscle tissue and fascia. And then every muscle fascia, right, is made up of cells. But then a cell is made up of the cell membrane, and then the cytoplasm inside, it's a liquid, and then the ribosome, and then the mitochondria, and then the nucleus inside the cell. And then the nucleus inside the cell is made up of that DNA strand. And that DNA strand is made up of A, C, G, and U molecules. And these A, C, G, and U molecules comprise or hold the genetic code how your body will develop according to your karma. So not only is your karma invisible, but it also manifests in the form of your genetic code. And that genetic code then drives how the body will respond and grow when the food is ingested and converted. And how will the food get converted? Because some of us are diabetic, right? Some of us have, a high level of metabolism. Why is this? Why do some people have, a poor metabolism? You eat a little bit of one chocolate bar, next day, you break the scale, and then the rest of us, right, we can, feast, right? And there's no issues whatsoever. What is the determinant factor, considering both bodies are driven by the same laws, by the same intelligence, but what is that individual factor that determines how you will respond to food and how someone else will respond to food? This is this karmic factor that is also there, which manifests at the genetical code. So this is the Annamaya Kosha, which is a speciality for doctors. Why are doctors respected nowadays? In fact, doctors were always respected, not just nowadays. Why? Because for most of us, where is our eye placed? In the physical body. You're a doctor, you are God if you're a doctor, you are God to most people. In any country you go to, you are respected, you are treated well. Why? Because the eye is placed for most individuals in the body. Therefore, you as a doctor become my savior. Now, doctors are wonderful, but we can see how the professions and our relationship to professions also gives away indirectly where our eye is placed. So, Annamaya Hakaha, Anarase Naiva Bhutva. From the food, what happens? Anarase Naiva Vrdhim Prapya. From the food your body grows. Anarupa prativyam yadviliyate. And it dies in earth, becoming food for others. Tad anamayaha koshaha, that is the anamaya kosha. Otherwise called stula sharira, gross body. Next one, pranamayaha kaha. Okay, what is the pranamaya kosha? So again, you got this word maya and we got this word prana. So prana, so maya, modification, prana, modification. What is pranamaya kosha? It is the modification of prana. Now, what is the word prana? Modification of physiological functions. You know, what is the greatest fear? Besides public speaking, they say that, right? Vertical, horizontal, right? Vertical to horizontal. Now, what happens in the horizontal position besides sleeping when you're not sleeping? You know, when we're done, finished. Yeah, exactly. So we're not breathing anymore. So breathing is prana. And fear being put in death is indirectly fear being put in prana, because prana is responsible for inhalation and exhalation. So it's not a small thing. Oh, pranamayas, you know, okay, physiological functions. The whole death fear is in one of these 5 pranas, specifically the respiration, the inhalation and exhalation. If I stop breathing, since my I is put in prana, I will die, because who am I? I am that one who breathes. And if I stop breathing, then I will die. So we can see through this kind of how this I being placed in prana, you know, expresses in real life. Okay, now what are these 5 pranas? Let's just talk about this quickly. So prana, physiological functions, are divided into 5-fold, and it's just there to kind of make it more specific instead of this vague word. The first one is apana, right? You've heard this before, but we'll go through it again. Apana. Apana is the process of evacuating, right? So when we take food and there is the process of kind of, you know, evacuating through perspiration, through sweating, through you know, going to the bathroom. So this is an important function that's capable of in fact keeping you alive. This one single function, you know, if we were not given the ability to go to the bathroom, this would be torture, right? It would be torture for just 24 hours of not having that ability. Then the system cannot hold all of that toxins in there, and so it starts to, you know, well, shut down, because it just cannot cope with that. So in order for the body to keep going, it needs to keep releasing the old, digested, in order to receive the new. We also have prana. Prana is the capacity for going like this. You've just been doing it since we logged in the class. That was prana working. So I just want you to make a note here. I just said prana. Now we said prana maya. So this prana for inhalation and exhalation is different when we say prana maya. So prana maya is the whole category of these 5. One of these 5 is called prana, right? So there's a small difference there, but don't kind of mix it up. So when we say pranamaya kosha, we don't mean inhalation and exhalation. We specifically mean physiological functions. How many? 5. One of those 5 is, the second one is prana, which is responsible for inhalation and exhalation. So apana, prana. And then we have samana. Samana enables that food to, you know, that, you know, whatever food you've eaten, right, to take 5 or 6 hours to digest and to get converted into the right sources for the body's sustenance. Okay, so this too, when it's overloaded, then what happens? Then, the food doesn't get digested properly, then produces stool, it produces diarrhea. So stool and diarrhea are two indicators in Ayurveda treatment. If anyone's done full Ayurveda treatment, they will ask you to fill in a form. And that form in the morning will always include, how is your stool? They will actually ask you, so what's the stool quality? Was it drippy? Was it liquidy? Was it hard? And you kind of, maybe this is trained, what kind of questions are these? But it is indicator of specifically your samana, ability to digest the food. Because if the food is not being digested, then how else is that affecting your body? Well, your body is not completely receiving the nutrients, right? It's receiving kind of half of what it could. Now, what is this Bristol stool chart? This is some medical chart. Okay, Bristol stool chart. Okay, so we have this in the West too, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so these are indicators. And it's like, those worms in the stomach. I don't know what the condition is called, but the long tapeworm in the stomach. They used to scare us as kids about this. And now suppose there's a long worm in the stomach, and then you keep on eating, you're constantly hungry. It's like, what's going on here? So then so it kind of breaks down your natural digestive capacities. So we have to drink a certain medicine so that worm also becomes part of, food and gets evacuated by the help of apana. Yeah, so these are all little things that, in the pharmaceutical industry, we have medicines to address one of these five. The fourth one is udana. Udana is things like tears when you cry. That is udana activation. Burping, sneezing, vomiting. This is all enabled by udana. And also, udana is what energizes your subtle body at the time of death, and it allows the subtle body to leave the physical body. So some yogis can actually induce this, and we call this, I think, mahas, kind of, I don't know what the Sanskrit name is, but they can induce premature death by going to a deep state of meditation, affecting that udana prana, and thereby separating the subtle body from the physical body, and the physical body just drops dead in meditation, just like that. So this is, I think, Rani, you described to me one of your friends done this in the ashram.
Yes. Well, it's been many years that he's been in meditation period, and then he knew when he was going to go. He went into samadhi. He named the date, the time, and everything, and told the family. And he actually went into samadhi exact time, exact day that he told them. He was just sitting up in a position of meditation, and he told them not to come until this time. So when they came, he was already gone. He's left his body. Yeah.
This is amazing. This is yogic techniques of udana manipulation, and I don't know how else it happens, but it's possible. A lot of things are possible. Vyana is circulation of your body. For example, you take medicine and then you say, I suddenly feel better. So this is whereby the Vyana has now regained a natural rhythm, where the high blood pressure and the low blood pressure, they have neutralized back to their baseline. Therefore, the body becomes to work again. So if you think about the medical industry, most of it, more or less, is really just targeting one of these five pranas. This is amazing. And thereby, even shortness of breath, pneumonia. So this too has a certain way of being restored, right, by medical intervention. So these are prana modifiers, otherwise called the pharmaceutical industry. And for this, we have many models. We have Ayurveda modifier, Western system modifier, traditional Chinese or classic Chinese medicine modifier. We have Tai Chi for health, or Qigong for health modifiers. Pilates is a modifier. Yoga asana is a modifier of prana. Meditation can be modifier, considering we talk alternative nostril breathing. That's also a modifier of prana. Running is a modifier of prana. Sports is a modifier of prana. So many modifiers of prana in this world. And sometimes we can develop an entire industry just for prana modifications. And people get addicted to this. Because if your prana is functioning well, I tell you, oh, my coffee really adjusts my prana. I'm going to have more coffee, right? So look at the coffee industry. It's huge. Why? Because everyone wants to improve one of these 5 circulatory or whatever, what's digestion. I don't know what, I'm sure it increases your circulation or something, right? This is the whole $1 trillion industry just for Viana, for circulation. This is amazing. Now, it says here that prana includes your 5 action organs, right? Your hands, your speech, evacuation, walking, speech is talking, and what else do we have? Speech, hands, sex organ, feet, and anus, right? These are the 5 organs of action that enable you to participate in this world. So in this model, they connect pranamaya kosha and they include 5 organs of action. Okay. Now, this Tattva Bodha is the only book that is doing this. Because you're going to say in other Upanishads, they don't do that. They just say pranamaya kosha is just 5 pranas. Why are you including the 5 organs of action? Don't kind of look at it in a sort of a black or white way. What it really just wants to show is, in order to have your capacity of grasping, walking, evacuating, procreating, what does all of this need? It needs prana. To procreate, the person cannot be tired and fatigued. They have to have some energy, right? So they have to have some prana. So therefore, naturally, they connect the prana to 5 organs of action. And thereby, the model is kind of wants to show you how the prana enables you to get things done in this world. As we just said with the coffee example, the whole coffee situation is just so I could get things done. That's it. So I can modify my prana.
Yeah, it's true what you're saying, because the ancient treatments like Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine and all, they're always based on actually your pulse and prana breathing. And that's how they detect what illness you're going through. And they treat wholesome, any disease, whatever you go in with them. They look at all the 5 pranamaya. They look at the whole thing. They assess. But with Western medicine, they don't actually, they don't test your stools unless you've got a bowel problem or something. If you've got a cold, they won't test it. But in Ayurvedic, they test everything, the entire, your body composition, everything, to tell what you're going through. Yeah.
This is
and
true.
Even the why is related.
Yeah, because it's a holistic system. It's one holistic system. It's a synergy. Many systems make up the whole part. It's a synergy. Yeah, and as Rani also said, some people are able to tell that they're about to die. Now, when we're lying on the deathbed and we know, hey, I'm about to go. How do you know this? Are you getting a voice from somewhere? Not necessarily. You're getting your prana. You know that the system is slowing down. Sleepiness is coming in. I cannot stay awake for too long. It's very hard to stay awake and to do anything. One getting up session, it already tires you out. And so it becomes very obvious to the individual that their life is coming to an end. How do they know that? Because of their prana. Because their body still looks exactly the same. Their body was okay a week ago and the same body there now. So they have to be tuning in with something else, right? And this is what we call prana. Now, when it comes to knowing when you're going to die, this is a different story, because it's not like prana is failing. You understand this? Prana is fine, but you still know that you're about to die. This is a different intervention, which we call Ishwara intuition. Ishwara's intuition, where you're receiving a kind of like, you wake up in the middle of the night for some strange reason, and you have this feeling something terrible happened. You can't put your finger on it, but something is revealed next day. indeed something was related to you, your family or something, and now you make that connection. So how this happens is this this intuitive connection that you're able to tap into. I am not any of these five. These five are just incidental functions given for the purposes of the body working fine and resolving your stuff. Okay, that's what the teaching is here. I'm not any of these five. So next time we have, oh, you know, I'm low fatigued. I'm such a tired, dull, worn out person. I'm I'm wearing myself out. No, your prana is wearing out, right? So there's a slight distinction that we're able to now create by hearing the teaching. So that's the point, right? Because we're so kind of, you know, trained to say I am going through a hard time in my body and so on. So we create some space there that your body has a function, a role to play. It's going through cycles. And so by the teaching, you're able to identify, hey, this is the prana. One of them is failing. And therefore, we gain more objectivity in relation to our body. So it really does have a positive kind of a shock absorber in your life. Have you experienced this in your learning with Vedanta? A shock absorber. It provides as a shock absorber, right? It may not kind of be perfect. In fact, this is a utopian dream. Right? Anyone who tells you that the wise person is beyond the physical pain and all of this, this is convoluted teaching. There is a physical body. It's going to get, pain that cannot be avoided, and that it will be felt one way or the other. But owing to this objectivity, it as though reduces the pain because we're not so identified with it. Pranamaya hakaha, panchavayavaha. So 5 vital functions. What are they? Vagindriyani panchakam. They're 5 organs of action. So 5 vital functions, 5 pranas plus 5 action organs equals pranamaya. Mental sheath, manomaya. Manas. So manas maya, manomaya. This is just shorthand, manomaya. Your manomaya just means your mind in English, mind. Now, what is mind? Mind is looked into 2 ways. First, mind, manomaya, means seat of emotions. The ability to feel in response to the world and in response to your own stuff in the head, based on what you remember and based on what you conclude about the world. If you conclude a certain notion about someone, that's going to induce a very different emotive or emotion than if you conclude something else about the person. So how you feel is really your own doing. It's not like someone else is making you feel like that. It is entirely based on your conclusion of what that person means for me, what that person has done for me, and what I have done for them, and how the world is treating me, and how, and whether I am a worthless human being or a confident, relatively informed, relatively decent human individual. This conclusion also is going to induce this manomaya and make a conclusion and get added onto I sense. Therefore, it becomes part of who I am. This is how we build our identities. And the second is, what does this mind do? It receives data from the world, and it puts all of this data, like the sounds, like the pictures, it puts it all into one place. And this place, it recreates in your mind exactly what is outside. This is how perception happens. The senses are open, they're picking up light and sound waves into the brain. This gets converted into signals that the mind is able to grasp. And the mind puts all of this data, like the sound of the bird and the bird moving its mouth like that. And there's a synchronized voice of chirp, chirp, chirp. So all of this gets inputted inside your mind, and it recreates exactly what the bird is doing. How so? Frame by frame, like that. Literally like a frame. All you're seeing your whole life is just frames like this. If you were to slow down, it would be like a frame. One frame, another frame, another frame, another frame. Because the frames are happening so fast in your mind, it looks like right now you're having one continuous experience. You know, oh, everything's so smooth and there's a wonderful transition from one to the other. But what you're just seeing is one, and then like that, and then like that, right? And then when you put all of that together, it seems like a smooth, homogeneous experience. And therefore, this mind is what uses this data, and then it creates two options: sankalpa and vikalpa. Okay, so we're still on number 2. The first one is emotive capacity. The second is doubting capacity. And this doubting capacity uses sankalpa and vikalpa. Sankalpa is, I think I know what to do. And vikalpa is, I'm not sure. So this is what the brain does, the mind. I think I've got it. No, I didn't. I think I got it. No, I didn't. I think I got it. No, I didn't. Therefore, it goes through a doubting mechanism. And when there's a doubting mechanism, it induces what? An emotion of uncertainty. Does this feel pleasant? Well, that's for you to determine. So therefore, it induces number 1 because the pendulum is swinging. And when it finally stops swinging, a decision gets made. And that decision then becomes part of your intellect, your Vijnana Maya Kosha. That's the next kosha, right? That's the buddhi. But going back to Manomaya Kosha, so it consists of 2 capacities. 1, emoting. 2, doubting. What does doubting consist of? Sankalpa, vikalpa. Right? Sankalpa, I should, I should not. I should, I should not. I will, I won't. Like that. Okay. All right. And also, it says here that the mind includes your 5 perception organs. So this is obvious. Why? Because, again, you can only see, you can only make sense of things. In fact, your senses only have any validity if they're able to come into the screen of the mind. If they have nowhere to go, they just sort of fly by, they have to hit some surface, as though surface, not that your mind is a surface, but I have to come into one screen of the mind and I have to recreate the image of the world. Therefore, in this model, Tattva Bodha puts the 5 perception organs in your mind. Therefore, the mind, the doubting is not you. Okay, so suppose you say, oh, who am I? Have I got this knowledge? Oh, I think I got it today. And then tomorrow, no, I didn't. And then again, now I'm totally clear who I am now. And the next day, oh, no, I had it yesterday, but today it's gone. You see this? This is doubting. What is this? Identification with Manomaya Kosha. Therefore, what Vedanta is saying is, yes, it is an indicator, but at the same time, it is a means of recognizing what I am not. It's a means of seeing, hey, this is not who I am. This is just a mechanism meant to doubt. It cannot stop doubting. It's supposed to doubt. I can't stop it because that is the mechanism of the mind. Okay. Now, let's just ask the question, how do you understand that you are not the mind? Right? You are not the mind. First of all, what does the mind do? As we said now, it presents us frames, right? Frames from the world that the senses have picked up. These frames create thoughts in your mind. It is said that your mind, as a result of seeing data, but also from your own memories, creates about 60,000 thoughts per day. I don't know how they figure this out or whether it's accurate. It doesn't matter. But suppose it's 60,000 thoughts per day, right? Of course, we don't confront all of them, but they're there in your mind. Out of 60,000 thoughts, they are all distinct one from the other. Every one of them. One thought is more or less different than the other thoughts. So 60,000 changes of thoughts have no correlation to each other whatsoever, happen to you every single day. And yet, there is one invariable presence on which and because of which all 60,000 changes are wonderfully recognized, accurately recognized, perfectly recognized. Why? Because whatever is invariable implies that it has to be, right, not undergoing change. The only way you can identify 60,000 changes is if in every one of those 60,000 changes, there was an equal invariable presence that never moved, that never changed from the first thought all the way until the last thought. Do you understand the logic here? To know that something is changing, there has to be an unchanging factor. The unchanging factor is you, awareness. Okay? Therefore, now what happens is, out of these 60,000 thoughts, because the mind works through associative thinking, it chooses to, not that it chooses, but it takes one thought, such as, I am lonely, and that it associates that thought through association to something related, like because I'm unworthy. And then it takes another of those 60,000 thoughts and it says, because I am not lovable. And it takes another thought to support the three prior thoughts, because nobody likes me. And like this, out of the 60,000 thoughts, it built up a framework, suppose made up of 5,000 thoughts, and they're all about how I am unlovable, I am unworthy, nobody likes me, right? I'm a nobody, right? And now it seems like, in reference to this association, it seems like there's a continuity of these 5,000 thoughts because of this associative thinking. So what happens now is these 5,000 thoughts, they get added onto I sense, and that becomes my identity. And now what happened is I selectively, unconsciously chose to handpick, very specially handpick, I want this one, I want this one. Let me put it in my bubble of 5,000s. And then we add this 5,000 onto our I sense, and our I sense becomes what? Highly disempowering, becomes a small, limited person, who needs stuff for one's kind of satisfaction in this world. So this is the power of associative thinking. So even though 60,000 thoughts are all different, due to associative thinking, we handpick certain thoughts, and because of this handpicking, there seems to be a continuity how I am a certain person, at the expense of ignoring all of the other 55,000 thoughts. This is the power of the mind. So let's just go through a relationship between your mind and you awareness. So what do we say about the mind so far? Emoting capacity, doubting capacity, and associative thinking. Okay? And all of the 60,000 thoughts are all distinct from one another, and yet they all come. And who was there before the thought came? I was there. While the thoughts are there, who is there while the thought is there? I am there. When the thought is no more, who is there still? I am there. When the new thought comes, who is there to witness the beginning of a new thought? I am there. When that new thought again goes away, who remains to recognize the absence of that thought? I do. Then who continues to remain exactly the same, unchanged, familiar to oneself for the next thought, unfamiliar thought to arise? That same I who is there to recognize this new familiar thought, and that familiar thought having gone, who familiar still remains? I do. The next unfamiliar thought comes, who's there still familiar? I am. You understand? So what's the one familiar presence throughout all of these unfamiliar thoughts, new thoughts, right? This is what we call awareness, sat and chit. Right now you say, well, my thoughts are not unfamiliar. I'm very familiar with my thoughts. Well, again, that's because we entertain the same thoughts over and over again. So we're sort of used to them. But if you look at it from a standpoint of the fact that no thought is ever exactly the same as the previous one, in that aspect, we can say that every thought is unfamiliar. It's brand new. The reason why you say it's familiar is because it's kind of same what you've already had before, but it's not exactly the same, is it? Exactly. So it's not exactly the same. All right. So the one familiar presence, one available factor, one available I remains throughout all of these 60,000s that occur every single moment. Therefore, what does this tell us? I cannot be any one of these 60,000 thoughts. Why? Because if I were to be one of these thoughts, that when the thought goes, who goes with it? I go right along with that thought, exactly. But there is something that's familiar that remains throughout. That familiar, whatever you want to call it, Atma, I, this or that, you don't even have to call it anything. Just the familiar presence that remains is what we talk about as Brahman, as Atma. This is how the scriptures define it. Understand? So we need not get caught up in these words, Atma, Brahman, I, and all of this. This is just a pointer. We just need some name to help us to point so we can have a conversation. Why else is the mind not you? Because the mind, as we said, is just frames, one frame after another, And therefore, the mind is nothing but pictures, nothing but images, nothing but sounds and feelings and sensations and insights and epiphanies and memories. And therefore, the entire mind becomes an object of awareness, an object known to you, just an object known to you. Day by day, it's an object known to you. Sometimes those objects are dirty, impure, they are, dark, they are whatever, right? Sometimes they are colorful, they're, have a rainbowish kind of feeling to them. They're bright, they are wonderful to be with. But either way, they are modifications of the mind. They're modifications of vrittis, thought modes, just different thought modes appearing and disappearing one after the other. Throughout, in and through all of that, who remains familiar, who remains ever available, whatever you want to call that one is the one that is ever available, ever familiar. Okay? Atma. And also, why is it that you are other than the mind? Would like someone else like to give me a reason? There's another logic that we can apply. Why else?
There's no mind in deep sleep.
Excellent. That's exactly what I was going to say. So Nagesh is 100% with it. So if you were as good as your mind, then nobody would go to deep sleep, because who wants to go out of existence? It will be fearful. It's like, hey, I don't want to go to sleep. I will go out of existence. The mind, will go out of existence. Now, in deep sleep, we know there's no mind because there's nothing to know. We discussed this already, right? There's no memories, there's no sensations, nothing, not even thinking, not even capacity to say, hey, there's nothing, not even that. Therefore, knowing the mind is going to go, the fact that I go to sleep comfortably, wonderfully, enthusiastically, implies there is something about me that recognizes that whatever disappears in deep sleep is other than myself, recognizes that I will still be there in deep sleep. So Vijnana Maya Kaha. So what is Vijnana Maya? Buddhi Jnana Indriya Panchakam. As I said, it's the Buddhi. That means it's the intellect plus Jnana Indriya plus the 5 organs of perception. And now let me just read the mental sheath. Now, what is the mano? That's what we just discussed, right? So manomaya kaha. So what is the mind? What is the manomaya? Manaha cha jnana indriya panchakam. Simple. It is the mind plus jnana indriya. So we just discussed what the mind is, plus the 5 sense organs, the 5 organs of perception. And then what's the intellect? Same thing. Buddhi plus jnana indriya. Buddhi plus 5 perception organs. So we already know what the 5 perception organs are. We just have to know what the buddhi is. Let's see. So next one, Vijnana Maya Kosha. Now remember, it's only a kosha when. What does kosha mean? Cover. It only becomes a cover when? When I is identified with it. Only then it becomes as though a cover. When you're able to objectify, this is just a function of this mechanism, then it's no longer a kosha, it is what? It's a sharira. It's just a container. It's just a function used for a certain purpose. Thank God it's there. Okay. So Vijnana Maya, another name for it is Buddhi. Buddhi, we all know, means just intellect in English. It has 3 functions. The first function of Buddhi is cognitive capacity. Cognitive ability is what makes inference possible. It's what analyzes data. It's what decides. It's what works things out. It's what creates solutions to problems. It is what starts a war or ends a war because it's able to come up with certain facts. It's what is able to perform research, draw conclusions, and form a cohesive, rational argument, which is paramount in Vedanta, because Vedanta does require a certain intellect to kind of go through these statements. The second is of intellect is it's the decision maker. Decision maker means this is what I will do, right? I've made up my choice. So I've made up my mind. Now, notice when I say I've made up my mind, you know that statement? I've made up my what? Manomaya kosha. So what happened? It went from vikalpa into sankalpa, and it stayed there. Sankalpa means I should. Now, when it stays in the I should, that's called the manomaya kosha, sankalpa. Then it drops into the intellect, and that's when you say what? I've made up my mind. This is what I will do. This is the course of action. And therefore, what happens then? The emotion in the manomaya kosha, which we said is the first function, the capacity to emote, then that emotion also changes from uncertainty to certainty. And then you feel a certain ease about your life, about your experience. So the second function of the intellect is to make decisions. This is what I will do. And sometimes we will see this even in our prayers. We will say prayers like the Gayatri mantra, Om Bhur Bhuvasaha, Tatsavitur Varenyam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyaha Yaha Naha Prachodayat. So in other words, Lord, enlighten our minds, bring light to my mind so that I can make the right proper decisions by getting out of my subjectivity and thereby discovering my truth, right? So the truth of this Gayatri mantra is meant to clear up your mind so that you can make the right decisions in reference to gaining moksha, right? However, this mantra can also be used to make the right decisions. Hey, Lord, brighten up my mind so that I can make money, so that I can, attain lovely, right, wealth. This is wonderful, right? However, it also shows us the intention behind the prayer depends on where is my eye placed, right? So now if my eye is placed in the intellect, then it's going to engage in this sort of a prayer so that my intellect, should we say, so that I, since I am the intellect, so that my intellect can, sort of make better decisions. In the self-help industry, we will say what? You are a product of your decisions. That's self-help. Wonderful stuff, right? I spent many years in this, and I've heard this so many times. You are a product of your decisions. That is right from one standpoint, from the standpoint of the intellect, but the word you is not looked into. Therefore, yeah, your intellect is a product of the decisions it's already taken thus far. However, you are not necessarily that, because the intellect is just a function given an upadi to be worked with, to be transacted with in this world. So the first function is cognitive capacity. The second one is decision making. And the third one is kartrtvam. Kartrtvam means I am going to do something in order to kind of enjoy. I'm going to do something, right? This sense of doer, action taker, the one who has to go in the world and get something done. So kartrtvam is that sense of doer, the one that's writing this down, the one that's going to get work done tomorrow, the one that's going to drive the car, the one that's going to solve a problem. I need to do something. That sense of doership. Let me do something. Kartrtvam is a topic in the Brahma Sutra whereby the common question will be, do I have to do something in order to gain Atma, or do I have to know Atma? This is a conversation in the Brahma Sutra. And so some schools will say, no, you have to do something, like the yoga schools, right? You have to kind of go into nirvana, you have to do samadhi, you have to do the Patanjali Yoga Sutra 8 steps, and therefore then you arrive to who you are. And then Vedanta says, no, you don't have to do anything to gain Atma, because you are already present. It's not like you don't have Atma, you already have Atma, you are Atma. Therefore, there's no question of doing to gain Atma. It's only a question of knowing or removing ignorance that denies me from recognizing that I am already Atma right now. Right, but besides the point, this is kartrtvam is this sense of doer. And again, it is, listen, kartrtvam is a strong identifier, one of the strongest identifier in the world that we have. In fact, there's one stronger as we get to the next kosha. It is that sense of do. Can you recognize this strength in the world? Sense of doing one thing. If I'm not doing this, I'm doing that. If I'm not, even in the spiritual world, what are you doing? I am doing walking to the Himalaya mountain, or doing the sannyasi, or I'm doing the mind purification. I am doing the, whatever practice in order to discover in order to gain Atma. So this kartrtvam is just immensely powerful driver. Now, why is it driving? That's what we will discuss next week, because of Ananda Maya Kosha, the most important kosha to understand. But let me just finish Vijnana Maya Kosha. So far, Vijnana Maya Kosha is what? Cognition, decision maker. 3, kartrtvam. The thing to understand about kartrtvam is it's just a function of the buddhi. That's it. Just a function. It is, it's just there to help you do things in order to work out your stuff. That is it. Now, let's close this by asking, why is it that you are other than your buddhi? This is the most important inquiry. Why are you other than the Vijnana Maya Kosha? The first reason is, see, when the teacher communicates something and wishes to transfer that to the student in the way that it was originally meant to be conveyed, and you, the listener, capture that information and form a thought in your buddhi exactly as the teacher is conveying, then we call that knowledge. Knowledge has taken place. The teacher has communicated something, and their intention behind their teaching has been perfectly captured by your buddhi. Your buddhi then creates a vritti that coincides, that corresponds to the original teaching. When this vritti occurs, we say understanding has taken place. We call this in short, aha, I've got it, I understood. In other words, jnanam has taken place. Now, when the jnanam has taken place, do you walk away going, I've understood that 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 1 = 2, I've understood that 1 + 1 = 2. Do you constantly carry this understanding with you? No, you're instantly free for a new understanding to take place. In other words, the understanding, which is a product of the buddhi, does not stick onto the invariable presence being I. The second reason why you are other than the buddhi is because your buddhi comes to know things, but your buddhi also experiences a lack of knowing, right? You say, I know that I don't know, or I'm aware that I know. And you also say, I'm aware that I don't know. You understand? So this know and don't know, this is a product of the buddhi. And yet there is an awareness in whose presence knowledge of knowing, right? The buddhi knowing and the buddhi not knowing, both of them are known to you. Both of them are objects of knowledge. I know something. Now, when I say I know, the buddhi knows something, the buddhi doesn't know something. Both the knowing and the not knowing are also objects of knowledge, right, in the presence of awareness. Therefore, just because you know that your buddhi, because you're aware that your buddhi knows or doesn't know, means that you are other than the buddhi. Again, the knower, the awareness is other than the object of knowledge, which is the intellect. And the intellect experiences always a state of what? Confusion or certainty. And all your life, you know about, I am confused, I am now certain. I am confused, I am certain. Therefore, whatever this I is other than the instrument of the buddhi. Okay. And finally, the third reason why you're other than the buddhi is, I want you to think about this. Okay. What do we say the third definition of buddhi is, of Vijnanamaya Kosha? They're the same names. Kartartvam, right? Kartartvam, sense of doer. Now, I want you to bring the three states, specifically the waker and the dreamer, and make an argument why you're other than the Vijnanamaya Kosha, using the Kartartvam argument. I'll bring you a little tip. Your Kartartvam in waking and dream, is it the same?
No.
Okay. Okay, now you understand the question? If I was the buddhi, the waker buddhi, the Kartartvam, the doer, like the student, the employee, then that notion could not be erased in the dream. You understand? So the dream, Kartartvam, you are a you're a dancer. But the Kartartvam in the waker, you're just a father, a mother, or a cook. So therefore, just the fact that it can negate it, it means that it was never me to begin with in the waking state. And therefore, by this, we can also use the states, the three states, to integrate into this teaching to help us gain some new arguments. Okay.
But again, Andre, when you say Kartritvam, immediately the opposite comes to mind, the Bhoktritvam, the sense of ownership and authorship. Then the Vedanta says that the moment you are able to sever the ownership and authorship, only then you can truly objectify existence. Is that true?
I didn't quite get it. What's
the severance of ownership and authorship from the self?
Okay, so good. So see, the main issue here is Kartartvam identity. It's not necessarily Bhoktartvam, the enjoyer, because see, why do you want to do things? Do you want to do things so that the byproduct of that doing is suffering, or the byproduct of that is kind of, pleasant?
Result orientation.
Yeah, it's result orientation, but what kind? A pleasant, right? A pleasant result. You want a pleasant result. So in other words, I want to, this is brilliant argument that I actually wanted to put next week, but I'll put a few minutes here. See, your Kartartvam, your doer, is motivated by what? Bhoktartvam, right? The enjoyer. So there's something there's something enacting this dur, and you have to ask, what is it? And this, which is enacting, we call this bhoktritvam. Now, bhoktritvam belongs to Anandamaya Kosha. So in other words, it's the Anandamaya Kosha that is driving this entire world to conduct activities. Okay, that's causing us to do things that to other people may seem kind of silly, but you say, no, I want to do this because I gain a certain pleasure. I'm doing this because I gain a certain enjoyment out of this. So the kartritvam is motivated by the bhoktritvam, which I'm not going to discuss now because it's a huge topic next week. Now, going back to Bao's statement, which I hope I got right, the bhoktritvam, listen, you cannot get rid of bhoktritvam, nor kartritvam. That's the whole point. They are just functions of these koshas, these Annamaya Kosha and Vijnanamaya Kosha. That's what they are. They're just functions. The only, what inquiry here is just recognizing, creating some space. There are functions assigned. I need not put my, kind of getting tangled in this door. And if I am doing, now there's a recognition. Well, the door is doing because it has to do, right? It's programmed to do. It's programmed to do according to its samskaras. You can't not do. Even if you want to stop doing, you're going to feel compelled to do something, right? Now, so yeah, we're not eliminating anything. We're just recognizing and bringing them to light. That's all you are doing. There's no sense of eliminating your Vijnanamaya Kosha, your ego, the Anandamaya Kosha. The point is you did not create them. Therefore, you cannot destroy them. What you did not create, you cannot destroy. You understand? The only thing that you can destroy is what? There's only one thing in the universe you can destroy. Yeah.
Your ignorance.
Ignorance. That's it. Ignorance is the only thing that can be destroyed. Everything else we need not touch. We need not touch the world, not touch your body, not touch your mind. It is just an order governed by the total intelligence. Just leave it alone. Let it do its thing until the last breath. But we're just putting our eye in the right place by recognizing where do I commit a mistake? Therefore, this conversation will continue next week, and we will talk about the Anandamaya Kosha and who you are, Satchit Ananda, and we will see what they are. Namadav, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.